Wow. So, Phineas and Ferb, how we did it. Oh, and by the way, happy 4th of July, everybody. You guys celebrate that, right? First of all, who the heck is Jeff Swampy Marsh? Good-looking fella. I got into animation rather late in life. I was, up until the age of 28, pretty much everything, including a car detailer. I made fiberglass race car bodies. I was a janitor. I worked in a bank servicing ATM machines. The list goes on, and I ended up as the vice president of sales and marketing for a computer company. No earrings, suit and tie, and I just sort of freaked out one day and quit. And, hey, Chris, people I haven't seen in a while. And a buddy of mine said, I've seen your drawings. You can probably get a job in animation. I'll help you get a portfolio together. And seeing as how I was unemployed and had a huge mortgage, that seemed like a brilliant idea. And 3 months later, I had a job on The Simpsons, drawing backgrounds. And I remember 6 days into the job, I was sitting at my desk and began to laugh out loud like an idiot uncontrollably, to the point where I actually had to go outside because the people sitting next to me thought I'd lost my mind. And I realized at that moment, this is where I should have been all along. The fact that they paid me to do this job just was hysterical. And then I did 4 seasons there, started out a second season, and then went on to a show called Rocko's Modern Life, which is the first opportunity I had about 4 years later to write and direct, and where I first wrote and direct with Dan Povenmire, who I'd met previously on The Simpsons, sitting across the aisle from me. And we liked working together so much and writing songs together that we thought, hey, let's make a show, we can sell the show, and we can keep working together. It was a devastatingly simple plan that just took 13 years to actually work. During that time, Dan and I did not work together again. I went on to work on shows like Family Guy, King of the Hill. I worked on King of the Hill. Dan went to Family Guy. And I ended up over here in the UK for doing a show called It's the Mr. Hell Show with Bob Monkhouse, the late Bob Monkhouse, which, thank you, if you remember that. We had a good time. And sadly, the person who ordered the show left the BBC after they ordered it, and the new person who came in didn't like the show at all. So if you caught it, it was on somewhere between 10 and 1 in the morning on Sunday nights, occasionally. Needless to say, we didn't get another season. And then I worked on Bounty Hamster, and then for a while I ended up with the lovely people up at Cosgrove Hall, where I got to spend a wonderful year and a half working with genuinely some of the nicest folks I've ever had the pleasure of making cartoons with. And I was here in London when I got a call from Dan saying, I think I've managed to sell Phineas and Ferb, which was kind of, what? 13 years we've been pitching this. Oh, there you go. I also do the voice of Major Francis Monogram. Any of you have seen the show? Morning, Agent P, the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz is up to no good again. Thank you. That is actually my proudest comedy contribution to the show is the OWCA, which is the organization without a cool acronym, which I got from my days in the computer business. Little trivia. The technology that they used to use for scanners to communicate with computers was called Twain technology. Some of you may remember Twain. And I found out from the guys who designed it that Twain stood for technology without an important name. I thought that was genius and the funniest thing that anybody had done in the computer business, so I stole it. Phineas and Ferb is massively successful, which is kind of scary and humbling. Dan and I have pretty good imaginations and fairly healthy egos. There was no way that we imagined that this show would reach so many people and so many viewers. We were pretty cocky and thought we'd certainly get a couple of seasons out of it because we were sure the show would connect with people, but what's happened with Phineas and Ferb is absolutely staggering. We did a Disney Channel original movie, Across the Second Dimension, which was the #1 most viewed cable movie the year it came out. It's in, I think, every country in the world. It's in countries that I didn't even know existed, but then I'm an American. Most countries I don't know existed because they don't seem to cover it at school. We've been nominated for so many great awards. We've actually won a couple of them, Emmys and whatnot. The list of guest stars has been humbling to me. We realized how many folks were fans of the show because we would ask the most outrageous people to come do the show, and most of the time they would say yes because they knew the show, which is kind of freaky. And now there are t-shirts, video games, boxer shorts, boogie boards, face wipes, Phineas and Ferb face wipes. You can get those in Japan. They're Perry the Platypus themed, to take your makeup off. I don't know. I guess that's big with kids. We've got the phone, my Perry the Platypus phone cover. All of this has just been sort of crazy, to say the least. They didn't announce to turn your phones off. Dude, really? It's this man right here, just so. Sorry. Like I said, back in 1993, Dan and I were working at Rocko's Modern Life, and we had this brilliant idea of creating a show so that we can keep working together. And then 13 years later, we did get the call from Disney. I moved back from London to Los Angeles, and we started the process of developing the show. It was the rantings of two middle-aged men who believed that kids didn't get out and do things anymore. We used to get out every summer and build go-karts and tree houses and probably things that are so incredibly dangerous we never should have done them. But it was the 60s and we didn't know any better. We were jumping our friends on bicycles, making plays, filming movies on Super 8 cameras. And all we saw kids doing these days was watching DVDs and playing video games. And so that was kind of the genesis of Phineas and Ferb, is kids who actually got out and did stuff. It all started actually, I think, with Phineas. Dan did a drawing on a paper tablecloth at a restaurant in Pasadena and brought it in the next day, this little triangle-headed kid, and said, I think this is our character. It's two boys just trying to make the best of every summer day. And their sister Candace, who believes that if she were to do the same thing that the boys were doing, that she would get busted. So it's only fair that Phineas and Ferb should get busted. So she's always trying to turn them into her mom. And of course, they have a pet platypus named Perry, who has a double life as a secret agent, fighting the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz every day, who's bent on taking over the tri-state area. That's pretty much the show. Seems fairly straightforward. There they are. Aww. The show was optioned twice by a company from Malaysia about a year after we created it, who we found out later were trying to use that show to sell their existing shows from Malaysia that they wanted to sell into the US market. So that never got sold. We got the rights back. It went all the way up the channels at Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and was scheduled to go on the air at Fox Kids the summer before Fox Kids closed. So we were that close, missed it by that much. And it had always gotten a good response. We just never got a sale out of it. So lo and behold, when Dan was over at Disney pitching something else, the person said what they often do is, no thank you, but do you have anything else? And for years, we've been carrying around folders with Phineas and Ferb, so we went, yes, we have this, you should make this, it's really good. And they went, oh, that's great, thanks, it's not what we're looking for, but we'll keep this, which usually means they're putting it in the trash bin. Apparently they didn't, because 9 months later, out of the blue, Dan gets a call that says, we're now looking for boys' shows. Would you like to come in and do Phineas and Ferb? I think Dan said yes. Don't think they had to convince him, and he called me and said, I think I've managed to sell Phineas and Ferb. Do you want to come back? And I said, yes, actually. The sound you hear is me packing. This is the show, and everybody talks about, you pitched this for 13 years. Why? It was always the show that we thought we should be making. It was always the one that when we watched new shows come out, we thought, why isn't somebody doing Phineas and Ferb? This is a really great show. And we kept looking at it and thinking about reworking it, and every time we looked at it, we thought, no, this is the show. And it was just that simple. Or we're completely pig-headed and had no other good ideas. Just keep flogging this one till it worked. Either way, we finally got it sold and then went into the development process. Starting in 2005 is when we started making the premise. Ah, look. We were young then. Dan and I hadn't worked together in 13 years. I remember there was that terrible moment when we thought, what if it isn't as good as we remember it? And we wrote the pilot. I flew out to Los Angeles. We wrote the pilot in his kitchen. And then he flew out to England. I was still living here. And we finished off the storyboard in my kitchen in Chessington. And that was, it was just as good as we'd always remembered it to be. Thank gosh, because both of our wives had spent 13 years hearing how great it was to work with Dan and how awful it was working with other people. So had it not worked out, we'd have looked really stupid. Come to think of it, if we'd have pitched this show for 13 years and nobody bought it, we'd have looked pretty stupid. So thank you, Disney, for keeping us from looking so stupid. The next thing I want to show you is the pitch reel. I think we've got it coming up. I've been asked so many times since then, what is the most effective tool for pitching a show? And this pitch reel that we put together, I wish I could take more credit for it, but my partner Dan took all of the storyboard drawings that we did and kind of did his own version of an animatic because we couldn't go out to pitch the show everywhere. Dan and I were both always really good at standing up and pitching shows. We like the sound of our own voice. We're hams and we have huge egos, so we don't have a problem standing up and doing this kind of thing. But Disney required everybody, kind of all the networks and all the different channels all over the world to buy into this. And he put this together, which was just an automated version of what our pitch looked like. And I've never seen anything that so clearly gives you the idea of the show, so clearly outlines the characters, and this is what we were selling, and it worked fabulously well. So now whenever people ask me, I say, if you can put together something like this, it's the clearest way to get your idea across without any confusion. Storyboards are great, but unless you're an animator, it's really hard to read them. People tend to put their own voices in there and their own pacing and timing, and it may not be the one you intended. The other thing I like about this is it's just rough enough to make it feel like everything in it is not set in stone, which is good because networks and executives like to have some input. I've heard that. But I did want to show you some of this. This was the very first thing that was produced, that was sent out, and this is really what sold everybody on the idea of Phineas and Ferb. Hopefully this will work. If not, it's Neil's fault. Right up there. Say hello, Neil. Thank you.
Without any further ado, here's our show. We open on a beautiful summer sun over Phineas and Ferb's hometown. We pan down into their backyard and push slowly in on Phineas and Ferb, enjoying the shade under the tree in their backyard with their pet platypus Perry. As we do this, a Disney chorus sings, "There's 104 days of summer vacation before school comes along just to end it. So the annual problem for our generation is finding a good way to spend it. Like maybe
building a rocket or fighting a mummy or climbing up the Eiffel Tower. Discovering something that doesn't exist Frankenstein's brain. Over here. Finding a dodo bird, painting a continent, or driving our sister insane.
Short drive.
As you can see, there's a whole lot of stuff to do before school starts this fall.
Barry.
So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all.
Okay, we fade in on the same backyard that Phineas and Ferb always start every episode in. They're sitting under the tree in the shade, and we push in on them. Phineas says, "So Ferb, what do you want to do today?" Ferb shrugs. "What about Perry? What does he want to do?" We see Perry. He makes a weird purring, chirping noise. "Well, he is a platypus. They don't do much. I, for one, am starting to get bored, and boredom is something up with which I will not put. The first thing they're going to ask us when we get back to school is, what did we do over summer? We better have something great to tell them. I mean, no school for 3 months. Our lives should be a roller coaster. And I mean a good roller coaster, not like that one we rode at the state fair." Flashback of the state fair. They're coming up over the top of the first hill. We pull out and we see them come to an abrupt end. "Please exit to the left." Man, that was lame. Why, if I built a roller coaster, I would... "That's it! I know what we're gonna do today!" Mom off screen. "Phineas, Ferb, I'm gonna go pick up a few things. You boys stay out of trouble, okay?" "Okay, Mom." "We're gonna build a roller coaster." Mom walks to the car. We see Candace poke her head out the window, and she comes zipping out and zipping back in screen in the foreground. "I'm in charge, right? You did tell them I'm in charge." "Relax, Candace. Nobody has to be in charge." "But what if there's an emergency?" "Like what?" What if, I don't know, what if a satellite falls out of orbit and crashes into the house?" "If that happens, you're in charge." "Yes! Mom says I'm in charge! Conditionally!" "Whatever. Wait a minute, what are you doing?" "Homework." "It's summer." "Fine, you wait to the last minute then." "Well, I'm watching you." Boom, 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 boom. "And I'm in charge. Conditionally." Bam. Ring. Phone ring off screen. She goes to pick it up. "Hello? Oh, hi, Stacy. I can't go to the mall right now. Mom just went to the store. She left me in charge. You know, conditionally. Hey, if you go, could you see if Jeremy's there? He's the cute one that works at Mr. Slushy Burger. Yeah, he totally smiled at me last time I was there. I just about died. No, I did. I really did. Well, I mean, I didn't, but I just about did. No, I told you I can't. I'm watching my brother and my stepbrother, because they're always up to something. Yeah, and they never get into trouble, because Mom never catches them. But one of these days, I'm going to see to it that she catches them red-handed." Hear the lion roar. "Would you hold it down out there? I'm on the phone!" Well, like I said, Mom left me in charge, so that there'll be no shenanigans today. What are they doing right now? Their homework, I think. Man, they are such dorks. Why do you ask? What do you mean you can see it from your house? "See what?" She comes running out and sees Phineas and Ferb building this giant roller coaster out of the backyard. "Phineas, what is this?" This is genius. Do you like it?" "Oh, I am gonna go get Mom, and when she sees what you are doing, you are going down. Down, down, down." "Okay. But do you like it?" "T-O-W-N, down!" She storms off. Ding, 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 ding. They watch her go. "Hey, we need a blowtorch and some more peanut butter."
So there you go. One of the nice things about that was I showed that to a buddy of mine who works here in the UK very early on, and when we got done with the final show, that's the first episode, the roller coaster, I sent that to him, and the call I got was, "This looks exactly like the thing that you sent me, right down to the theme song. How did you manage to do that?" I think it's just because we're stubborn. It was nice seeing the show that we had in our head right at the beginning really did end up being in all ways what ended up on the screen. The development process was interesting. We did focus group testing very early on that little piece of animation, and Phineas and Ferb tested through the roof. We were down there for the testing, which probably in hindsight wasn't the best move to have us there for it. It kind of gave us a lot of ammunition to make no more changes in the show after that. We tested better than most of the live action shows had tested at the time. The casting, well, the other thing I want to say about the focus groups is they did focus group testing in England, and I actually specifically have to thank the UK market for keeping the Candace and Mom relationship intact. The original idea from the networks was that Mom and Candace were too confrontational with each other and that the American audiences wouldn't like that. The British audiences apparently loved conflict, thought that relationship was extremely realistic, and loved it, so we actually managed to keep it. The casting that we did from there, we ended up, Dan and I weren't fans of the Disney Channel before this, so a lot of the talent that ended up on the show, Ashley Tisdale and Allison Stoner and Mitchell Musso, people like that, were staples of Disney. We didn't know who they were, so we just listened to them as recordings and numbers and ended up picking them that way. Caroline Ray was the woman we got for Mom, and I bring up casting just because one of the other glitches that we had in the development process was the voice of the mom. And the note that we got about her was, she's a little flat, we should replace her. And our comment was, you can replace her with anybody you want, but after we get done directing her, she's still going to be flat. Because that's how we want Mom to be. Which is something I'll talk a little bit more about later, which is kind of interpreting the notes that you get. I'll talk about it later. Network notes. Oh, here, we'll talk about it now. There you go. It's right there. The interesting thing about dealing with network notes is that where I found most animators and development people and creative people who have shows run into problems are, the network note comes in that says, this character you have, Jane, isn't very edgy. Maybe you should make her hair purple. And then they get really upset that giving her purple hair, that's stupid. Maybe so. Everybody really focuses on the solution or the suggestion that's offered on the note. And one of the things we tried to do very early on in the process is not listen to the specific note, but understand that if you're getting a note, it's because for some reason your audience, that executive, whoever it is, disconnected from your show, your story, or your character at that moment. The solution is not to change their hair color, make a boy a girl, or anything like that most of the time. But you do have to figure out why they disconnected from that show, that moment, that scene, that joke, that character, and figure out a way to fix that. It keeps you from chasing around in circles, because changing the character's hair color usually doesn't solve the problem. We, like I said, ended up with a show, our first show, that looked almost identical to the pilot that we did. And I think it was a matter of us. One of the things that helped, we both done a lot of television and a lot of very successful shows. And we kind of, after 13 years of pitching, had taken the attitude of, look, we're going to do this the way we want to do it. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay, we'll keep pitching it. What's another couple of years? We could just keep going. And we really believed in the show. So there was a lot of things that we did stick to our guns on. One of the first notes that we got is, could you make the characters more attractive? Which is a nice note to get, very subtle. And we said, no, we can't. They went out and did a bunch of test drawings, which I still have in a drawer somewhere, which are great. We actually got the note at one point, they should have backpacks. Zack and Cody would wear backpacks. Anybody who's familiar with Disney, the Zack and Cody characters were thrown up at us a lot. But what we said is, if you buy into these characters, the way they look isn't going to matter. How many people remember Rocky and Bullwinkle? Anybody over here? These were the ugliest characters ever. The models didn't match from one shot to the next. The backgrounds were horrible. It was a hysterically funny show, and everybody loved the characters. What we didn't want to do is have a show on the air that looked exactly like every other show on the air, and especially every other show on Disney Channel. We really wanted this to look unique. So that was one of the places where we really stood firm. The other major battle we had was, we had always intended this to be a premise and storyboard-driven show. We didn't do scripts, which is not the way Disney did things. They really like to know what you're doing with their money. And if you've met us, you wouldn't give us a large chunk of money and then trust us to wander around for 6 weeks, hopefully making a show that you will like. We're more respectable now, but at the time, that would be a really foolish move. However, with a lot of cajoling, we actually did get the network to say, okay, you can do that, which I have to applaud them for. We did understand just how much courage it took to let us do that. We were doing a show that everybody had told us through the development process was not a Disney show, didn't look like a Disney show, was very funny and they liked it, would probably never get on the air. And our thought was, we believed that it was a Disney show, that it had all of the right qualities to be at home on the Disney Channel. And we really wanted to make it the way we wanted to make it, to give it the best chance of success. And I remember saying early on, it would be really great if a few years from now we looked at the Disney Channel and we were actually able to change the perception of the network. That if this show was successful, more shows would come like this, and it would actually change the demographic of people watching the show. And I think it was about 6 months in when that actually happened, which was very rewarding. But it was the biggest sticking point, and it was, well, the actual day where we had that final discussion, they came down and said, okay, we'll make a compromise with you. We'll do a show that's half script, half premise. And Dan and I said, look, you bought the show, you can make any show you want. It's yours, you own it. Go with God. If you want us to work on it, this is the show we want to make. And we'd love to do it, but this is the way we really believe it should be made. And again, I have to thank Disney and the executives who had the courage to stand up and say, okay, if you believe this passionately, we'll do it your way. I think the unspoken subtext to that was, if it goes horribly wrong, it's your fault. Which was okay, because we were willing to accept that risk. We did give on some things. There was a whole issue about they wanted to have a girl in the show that was aspirational, which originally they wanted Candace to be that, which we said we can't, she's the foil. So we did beef up Isabella's part, and she became a much bigger part than she was in the pilot, and that's where we got the Fireside Girls. There was a few minor things, but for most of it, we did stick to our guns, and hence the show still looks the way it did originally. The other thing that I think we did early on, because I get that question a lot, is what do you think it is about Phineas and Ferb that connected with so many people? And one of the first things we did, and I want to thank Simon Pegg for giving that really nice quote, we decided very early on that children are much more intelligent than most people give them credit for. So we never took a joke out or anything out because we thought it was too smart for the kids, too intelligent, or would be over their heads. Because the worst thing that could happen would be it goes over their heads and hits the adult sitting behind them. And then the adult laughs. And then the kid turns around and says, why are you laughing? And then the adult gets to have a conversation with the kid about why that's funny. And now that kid has an interesting piece of information. The only rule we made is if we do something like that, the explanation of why it's funny cannot be uncomfortable for the adult to explain to the child. In essence, we decided to make the show really for each other. We sit around and try to make each other laugh. And then we just don't include anything that would be inappropriate. And that was kind of a challenge to see if we could do a show that was cool and edgy like that. That again, wouldn't alienate children with the adult humor. The other decision that we made early on was that we noticed a lot of the characters in kids' television were either jerks or idiots. Lots of them. And they always tended to be the most interesting characters, especially in a lot of the live action. And we'd become parents in the time between creating the show and actually getting it on the air. And we thought, you know, that's not what we want our kids to see. Can we make a show that is still funny and edgy and, you know, appealing to all different age groups, from adults to teenagers to kids, and do it without populating it with jerks and idiots? And the amount of feedback we've got from kids on both of those items and adults on both of those items is overwhelming. Very early on, I remember a very small kid came up to me and said, I want to thank you for making a show that's smart. And for the parents, the number of people that have come and said, I just love the fact that it isn't a bunch of people being mean to each other. It makes it much harder to do the comedy. A lot of our writers, in fact, one of them, I remember one day, because we would redline lots and lots of jokes that they did we thought were, mean, jerky, or idiotic. And he finally got mad one day, and he goes, what is it, you guys? Did these characters have any personality at all? We said, yes, it's just not the same personality that you've been writing on the last 15 shows you've been working on. It's really a lot harder to do. It is a lot more rewarding when you get it right, but it is a lot more difficult. I think it was about halfway through second season, that same guy came over and said, okay, I get it. He's been much better since. The other thing that we do, and we make a very conscious effort to do, is to make sure that the story and the characters come before the gags. Nothing that we do in Phineas and Ferb is really a gag tree. If the audience doesn't care about the characters in the story, then they're not going to care about your gags. They're not going to last, and they're not going to have a life. And so that's also been another frustration for some of our more gaggier writers. But it's worked out pretty well. And there it says, it never underestimate your audience's intelligence. And if you can do that, I think you'll have a much better shot at success. Which brings us to our target audience and our real target audience, which I kind of talked about earlier. We've never made this show for kids. We've always just made it for each other. And we've put a lot of stuff in there that we know, we've thought that nobody will get. Come to find out, as soon as it goes on the air, thanks to Twitter and the internet, we find that people get almost everything, frighteningly so. It makes us even more careful. There we go. Again, I talked about this is, our creative process is outlined to board. We don't do scripts. Everything is given from our writer's room in about a 3-page outline to storyboard artists who then flesh all the dialogue out. They have about 2 weeks alone in a room to get a rough storyboard. Then they pitch it to us. We tell them why we hate it. They go back for another 2 weeks and rewrite it, and eventually we get to something that everybody's happy with, which again requires the patience of the executives, because these shows look really out of shape until you're about 6 weeks in. I know there was some panic moments. We just did a Marvel crossover episode, and we got a whole new batch of executives from Marvel in who had to sit tight and be patient through about 6 weeks, and they thought, oh my God, what have we done? These people are insane. This is going to look awful. The animatic at 6 weeks, it all turned out beautifully. We work out most of that stuff in the animatic, getting it up there in kind of the fashion you saw in that pitch reel where the stories and the voices all come together in a little bit of a timing is where we know whether the jokes are working or not. This is also when we start rewriting the show again, which again requires a lot of patience from the executives, because what they saw in the last storyboard pitch may not look the same when it gets done with the animatic. But that seems to be where all the jokes actually get fine-tuned. After that, we put the music in. We do at least one song in every 11-minute episode. It works because Dan and I and at least 2 or 3 of our crew were able to write almost every song. At last count, we've got over 300 songs. Wow. Which was kind of daunting. We used to write the songs on a Friday night and sing them into our composer's answering machine really badly. We'd get up and bash something out, and at the end of it, we'd say, great, it just needs to sound like the Sex Pistols meets Frank Sinatra. Have a good weekend. And by Monday, we would have a song that sounded like Frank Sinatra singing in front of the Sex Pistols. It's really cool. One of the main reasons why we started to do music was that Dan and I realized music is kind of our ticket to immortality. Long after you've forgotten the stories. How many people remember the Archies? How many people are willing to admit they're that old? Here, all right, everybody with me. Sugar, ba 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 bum bum bum. Oh, honey, honey, ba 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 bum bum. Name one story that was on the Archies. Anybody? One storyline? Anything? No. But you do remember the song. And we always thought, that's really cool, you remember the song. So we started writing songs early on when we were working together, even when they didn't want us to. We wrote all the songs for Rocko, and at one point they said, okay, if we give you a musical episode, will you stop writing songs? And we went, sure. So they gave us a musical episode. We wrote all the songs for it. It was great. The next show that we did, we put a song in it. We said, thought you weren't going to write anymore. And we lied. We use the songs both for background and to push the story along. And it is, I think, the most fun part of the process, maybe rather than doing the voices. The voices are the next thing that we layer in. We've been able to give all of the voice actors who come in a lot of freedom. Because we know we're going to do a lot of rewriting, everybody who comes in is pretty much free to ad-lib. And as long as we get what's written on the page first, we quite often use the funny, weird, wacky stuff that they did after the good take. And that's usually what ends up on the show. For all of you who don't know animation, we get the question a lot about how physically, what's the process of making the show? And we got the question so many times, we finally thought we'd just do a little documentary film about it, and this should explain everything. This process that we're outlining in this little short takes about 8 to 10 months for every show. Every 11 minutes takes about 8 to 10 months from inception to completion. So enjoy.
Yeah, we're animators. This is how we live. 24/7, 365.
Actually, it's more of a 40-hour work week.
Yeah, but sometimes we work weekends. We don't always put it on our time card. Check it. I roll into the mouse house, 9 a.m. Flash my badge to security. They know who I am. Breakfast at the commissary.
A bagel and honey.
Then it's time to get serious and make with the funny. Cause we're animating. That's right, we're animating. We're making Phineas and Ferb. Yeah, we're animating.
We start with a premise, just a page and a half. We pitch it in the writer's room to see if we laugh.
Then we check on the executives, esprit de corps. She says, yeah, we're gonna outline. That's just one page more. Now a lot of productions go to script from here, but not us. Oh no, we got no fear. We're going straight to boards, cause we draw it when we write it.
It's a visual show.
And we don't try to fight it, cause we're animating. That's right, we're animating. We're making Phineas and Ferb. Yeah, we're animating.
When we're done with the boards, we pitch it to the whole crew to see if they giggle too, or if they just throw food.
Sometimes it's funny stuff, sometimes it's barely amusing.
We rewrite it again.
It's all picking and choosing, all the good stuff here and all the bad stuff there.
I worked hard on that.
Here costs some money, who cares? Cause it's a cutthroat life, drawing boards and pitching.
If you can't stand the heat,
Stay out of the kitchen, cause we're animating. That's right, we're animating. We're making Phineas and Ferb. Yeah, we're animating.
in the sound studio recording all of the voices. We get 3 takes of everything.
It's all about choices, then we digitize it all. Technology so groovy, put it into animatic and make it a movie.
We draw props, characters, backgrounds, to throw in a dash of color.
Does that look good to you?
Yeah, then it goes to timing, little secret in the biz. Ask anyone here, nobody knows what that is.
Then after timing, it goes straight on to checking, and that's how we roll.
24 frames a second, cause we're animating. That's right, we're animating. We're making Phineas and Ferb. Yeah, we're animating. You know we're animating. That's right, we're animating. We got an artist named Herb. You know he's animating.
Ship the whole mess overseas where they in between it. And all of this goes on before you've ever even seen it.
When it's back, it goes to editing. We pull an all-nighter.
Gotta respect the schedule.
But nobody cuts it tighter.
We call retakes,
Alright.
cause mistakes need fixing.
Then it's music and sound effects and audio mixing. Cause we're animating. That's right, we're animating. We're making Phineas and Ferb. Yeah, we're animating. I say we're animating. That's right, we're animating. Are we getting on your nerves? No, we're just animating. So that's how we do it. Are there any questions?
If there are, keep them to yourself.
I didn't think so.
We have way too much time on our hands. I've never had an experience where more people shouted at me. No, tough. Look tough. Tough. Wow. Pitching the board. That's what the boards look like when we stand up and pitch them. And this is the animatic from those boards. I'm going to show you a quick scene and show you what it looks like after we get done rewriting it. The interesting thing about this is how many of the voices in it you can tell are Dan. We actually had the original voice track for this. Anywhere where you hear my partner Dan is where we've rewritten.
Something's gone terribly wrong, Candace. You've swapped all their powers. Obviously, Thor's got Spider-Man's powers. Spider-Man got Hulk's powers.
Yeah, I could get used to this. I have a fear of heights. Could you please put us down?
Iron Man must have Thor's powers.
Well, at least he can move now.
Everyone has new superpowers except Hulk. He must have Iron Man's powers, but without the suit.
There's not much there.
I am feeling entrepreneurial. So give me the hammer. What do? I just stick out my hand, right? Come on, baby, come to Papa. That's not how it works. What do you mean? I've got your powers. Wielding Mjolnir is about worthiness, not power. Really? It's a fine distinction, but an important one. Potato, potato. I do not know what that means. What about the light? How do I control that? Actually, that only works with the hammer. What about flying? I've seen you fly. Well, yes. But not without the hammer.
Not without the hammer, right.
The thing I like about that clip is that whole discussion about Thor and the hammer was a conversation lifted directly from the Marvel executives. Because we'd written a bit where their powers got swapped, and then Iron Man got the power, and we said, great, so Iron Man gets the hammer, and they went, oh, no, Iron Man can't touch the hammer. Why? It's that conversation. We had that whole thing. It was great. So when we went back to repitch it again, that was what we had in there. Thank gosh they have a sense of humor about themselves. But again, that's where we fine-tune it all. This I just put up there because we got really cool people to do music with us. We had Shaka Khan and Clay Aiken do a duet, which is a great pitch because it only works if you can then get Shaka Khan and Clay Aiken to do it. Otherwise, the gag falls really flat. Recorded the last song with Davy Jones of the Monkees before he passed away. We've had from the B-52s. We wrote a song with Slash, Taylor Swift. So the music side's been really excellent. I think we're on our third CD at the moment. I think there's another one dropping, as they say in the biz, because I'm in the music biz now. If I'd have known that to get a hit record, I just needed to quit the music business, I would have dropped out of the music business when I was 18. Both Dan and I are failed rock and rollers who flogged around town with bands for far longer than we should have. There we are. These are the voices. Vincent Martella, Ashley Tisdale, Thomas Sangster, thank you, England. Alison Stoner, Caroline Ray, and the lovely Richard O'Brien as Dad, which was another great moment with the executives and the casting, is we'd like Richard O'Brien. And somebody said, who is he? I said, well, he did Crystal Maze in England. One of the executives at the back looked at me and went, not traditionally a Disney-friendly guy, but I have to say, one of the best casting jobs we did. He creates moments that are so incredibly real. I'll be eternally grateful to him. Malcolm McDowell is Grandpa and Barry Bostwick. Jack McBrayer over there who does Irving. Malik Pancholi from 30 Rock. We've been rating 30 Rock and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And of course, Dan, who does Doofenshmirtz, and myself, and a few others. There's some of the guest voices we've had. Man, that's a lot of people. Wow. Got Jon Stewart coming up. And these are the guys that I just wanted to throw up there so I could again say thank you for letting me steal your talent. We've had a good time with all these guys. Simon Pegg actually did the show, I think mostly because his kid watches it and he's a big fan, but he told me afterwards he was watching one day and we had Nick Frost do a voice on the show. And he said, I was watching it and all of a sudden Nick's voice was coming out of the cartoon. And I went, that's Nick. That's my cartoon. He doesn't even watch it. So I called him immediately. Nick, when did you fucking do Phineas and Ferb? So he was very glad when we asked him. That little clip you saw, after we have the animatic, we send it away overseas to, in our case, China and Taiwan. And after about 6 months, it comes back. And then we try to remember what it was that we wrote 6 months ago and why it was funny and why things aren't working now. Call retakes, and all of those elements, the voices and the music, all comes together in this finished product. So I'll show you this last little clip.
Something's gone terribly wrong, Candace. You've swapped all their powers. Obviously, Thor's got Spider-Man's powers. Spider-Man got Hulk's powers.
Yeah, I could get used to this.
I have a fear of heights. Could you please put us down?
Iron Man must have Thor's powers.
Well, at least he can move now.
Everyone has new superpowers except Hulk. He must have Iron Man's powers, but without the suit, there's not much there.
I am feeling entrepreneurial.
At least his vocabulary's improved.
So give me the hammer. What do? I just stick out my hand, right? Come on, baby. Come to Papa.
That is not how it works.
What do you mean? I've got your powers.
Wielding Mjolnir is about worthiness, not power.
Really?
It's a fine distinction, but an important one.
Potato, potato.
I do not know what that means.
Okay, never mind. What about the lightning? How do I control that?
Actually, that only works with the hammer.
What about flying? I've seen you fly.
Well, yes. But not without the hammer.
Not without
yes.
the hammer, right.
Turned out really well. I know I want to get to some questions, so I kind of want to get through this last bit for the people that are out there in the development process. I touched on it earlier. The whole process of network notes seems to be the most frustrating for everybody. And one of the things that I've learned a lot now being back in the States, specifically about a lot of the overseas shows that try to get a home in the United States, there's this moment when you've actually had somebody pick up your show and bring you into the development process where everything you've been working for as a creative, it suddenly happened. Here you are, there's a network interested in your show. This might be the only good idea you ever have. What if I do something wrong and screw it up because I've told my family and all of my friends and everybody I work with, and oh my God! So there's either this terrible fear that it is the only good idea I ever have, I'm not taking any notes, why would you want to touch and ruin my child? Ah! Or I will do every single note that's given to me because I don't want to offend anyone. And this is, either one of those paths is death. Understand that the network doesn't necessarily want you to address every note. They are looking for a dialogue there. And as I said earlier, a lot of times you get suggestions that shouldn't be taken as a suggestion or an automatic change. It just is an indication that something isn't quite working with somebody. We find often that the solutions are much smaller. I remember a glaring incident where we had a guy pitching a storyboard, and the line that didn't quite connect was literally, "I love you." He goes, oh, and the character comes in and he turns to her and he says, "I love you," and then the other character walks out of the room. And the note he got at the end of the whole storyboard pitch is, "I didn't feel that the character actually loved the other character. We should probably have him say that." And so the guy immediately got incensed. He waited until the executive walked out of the room. "He says it right there! It's there!" And I said, "Yeah, but if you remember the way you pitched it, it was, yeah," and he walks in and says, "I love you," and then he walks out of the room. And I said, "Don't make a single change, but next time when you pitch it, go." And then he walks into the room. He looks down because he's kind of nervous, and then he takes a moment, takes a big deep breath, and looks at her and says, "I love you." She turns surprised. And just pitch it that way. And he did. And the note he got back was, "I really want to thank you for putting that line in there. That really works." We've had other things a lot like that. You'll find that usually the solutions to addressing the notes are a lot smaller than you think they are. And don't get wrapped up in listening to the actual note or the suggestion. The other thing that I put down there, all of you executives, just do that for a moment. We often ignore notes if we don't think they're valid. So what you'll probably hear from us is something like, "Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you for that. No, we'll take a look at that." And we're not trying to be mean. there's just some things that we don't believe in, and if we think it's a small or frivolous note, that's the best way to deal with it. You will get a lot of things that are just thrown out there because people are trying to brainstorm and become part of the process. People are often too worried about offending the folks giving the notes, and for all of you creatives out there, don't worry about it. Engage in the conversation. Don't be an asshole. Try not to say, that idea is stupid. Only a moron would come up with a suggestion like that, which I've seen in meetings, and it doesn't go well. But something to think about. The other thing that I want to quickly say about the show, we are very inclusive. We took the Pixar model. There isn't anybody who doesn't have input on our show, which is why we make everybody get into the room on the show and stand up and pitch these boards, both to see the reaction and to get ideas from everybody on the show. And some of our best ideas have come from our production people, our timers, PAs, and scanners. Everybody has a valid input in our show, and it's been one of the reasons, I think, why they all turn out so funny. We never stop looking for opportunities to improve the show, which is why we end up doing revisions all the way down to the color process. We're still recording new lines then, if we think it works. And the other best advice I can give people, if you do sell a show, find really good people to do the work, and then have the wisdom to get the hell out of their way and let them do it. One of the hardest things was being able to give these children of ours that I lived with pitching for 13 years to a bunch of animators who, again, lovely people, but if you meet them, you wouldn't trust them with $5. But you really have to let people get on with it. And some of the best surprises in the show have come from ideas that I never would have had from the most surprising places. Any questions? Where are the? Who's got a question? Yes?
Jeff, brilliant.
Call me Swampy, please. Only my mom calls me Jeff.
Swampy. I tried to explain Phineas and Ferb to someone who hadn't seen it a few days ago.
How'd you do?
Well, I got a bit stuck on explaining that it has an A storyline and a B storyline.
It's actually got 3.
So, okay. I obviously didn't do very well.
Next question.
The one thing you haven't talked about is the Perry and Doofenshmirtz. Where did that come from?
The reason it came up in the first place is Dan and I, in every show that we used to write together, would put in a chase sequence. We always loved them, some sort of big fight dynamic. And so we literally stuck it on. And yet it seemed like a really great way to do kind of what we loved about Rocky and Bullwinkle. There was always several stories. We just wanted to have them interwoven so that one affected the other. But it was really just an excuse for us to do spy stuff and write spy music and have, and to play with a platypus. Beaver-tailed duck bill. Man, the fact that somebody did not make a show about platypuses before this just astounds me. We wrote the song by going to Wiki. The opening line is, semi-aquatic, egg-laying mammal. The only part we had to write was of action. The other great thing is that nobody has any idea what platypuses are like. That's not we have nothing like I don't think a platypus makes a sound. I don't know. We make the assertion that they're platypuses. They don't do, they may do a lot. There's probably a bunch of people in Australia going, not platypus. I don't know, but yeah, that was the whole reason for that.
Did you have any, because that strikes me as the one which would have sent executives into committee meetings. He's invented a new format. How are we going to cope with this?
They made us actually make 3 shows, solely because, and they told us, we don't think you can continue to have 3 interweaving storylines for any length of time. So we made one. They said, okay, make another. Okay, make 1 more. And then they went, oh, okay. What they didn't realize is Danford and I were going, I don't know if we can do that again. Oh my God. There was this horrible moment when they picked up 26 episodes. We went, great, thank you. Oh. But the truth is, when we started doing it, it ended up just getting easier. It's kind of like this muscle. One thing leads to another, and it just sort of works. I don't know why. Any other questions? Yes?
I am Australian, actually, and
You would know.
My pet platypus was nothing like Perry.
See,
they're poisonous, actually. They can
yeah, they
kill
have
you.
poisonous. Yeah.
Yeah.
I now know more about platypus than I ever want to.
I just wondered where a story often starts from you. Do you start with a cool invention, or do you start with an emotional sort of journey you want to take the characters on?
They have come from all those places. One of them that we did started because one of our writers came out and saw my son, who was playing rock and roll violin in kind of a School of Rock thing. What I felt stupid about is he saw that, and then wrote the whole Baljeetles episode. I'd been taking my son to these things for months and never thought of writing an episode about it. And we've done stuff that were really very personal stories, very small stories, and we've also just had a big bin of if you were 9 or 10 years old, what would you want to do in your backyard, which is where the roller coaster and the giant slide and all that stuff came from. We used to have a wall where we brainstormed what we thought was every possible Doofenshmirtz-inator. And we used to kind of mix and match. It's like, get something off the inator wall that we haven't used. So they kind of come from everywhere. And some of our best stories that you've seen on the air have actually been things suggested by production staff, not associated with the creatives at all, but they'll come up and say, I wrote this story, might be okay. You know. Some of them have turned out to be phenomenally good. Yes, unless somebody else has somebody somewhere. Yes, pass the mic along.
Thank you. Fantastic talk. Thank you very much. How do you feel about the chance to tell stories on other kinds of platforms like YouTube or phones or tablets? Are you involved in that, and how do you decide what to do and what not to do?
No, that's just wrong. Programs need to come through the television, young man. The proper old-fashioned way. It's great. The nice thing is now people have the ability to create fully formed visions of what they want and put it out for people to see. I mean, one of the results is you get tons of shows that are picked up just because of the number of YouTube hits. The tools are out there, sometimes downloadable for free, where you can make your own show. It's thrilling. I mean, we used to literally have to edit Super 8 movies to make a film. It took an entire summer, and they turned out awful. Just awful. My grandmother saved some of mine. They're hideous. So yeah, it's terrific, and the fact that there are now venues for all different types of programs, and they can be delivered in all kinds of ways, it's thrilling. I wish all this was available when I was younger. I might not have spent so long in the computer industry, or detailing cars, or working behind a bar. Ooh. Any other questions?
This process of doing an outline and then going straight to the storyboarding, how does that work? Do the storyboarders come up with the lines?
Yes.
Oh, great. That's cool.
The truth is that skill is really, really difficult to find. Somebody who has a grasp of both the visual, just drawing, and is also a good storyteller and has a good grasp of language. So the folks that can do that become incredibly valuable. We've also found that the writing and the dialogue kind of outweighs the need for good drawing. We've had guys that are just marginally above stick figure that have done storyboards for us, but because their writing is so good, I'd rather hire somebody to follow up after them and make the drawings look good, because what I'm getting from them on a character is so brilliant. So yeah, but it is a skill in short supply in the industry. So when you find folks, you tend to staple them to the desk and lie to them about what's going on in the outside world so they never leave you. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, up there.
Evening, Jeff. Thanks for the presentation. I grew up with a lot of US animation, and I'm wondering, did you get any UK animation over there? And if so, what were your favorites?
When I was younger, I got Danger Mouse, which I was lucky enough, again, to go up and work at Cosgrove Hall and meet some of the guys who worked on that. I still have a pencil drawing from, I think it was Mike White up there, who did a drawing of Danger Mouse for me that's framed up on my wall in Venice. I love that. Duckula was another one that I just thought was great. On the unanimated side, one of the hugest influences I had was seeing Tiswas with Lenny Henry one morning. I was living in Exeter. It was 1979 or 80. We'd been out carousing a lot. And we got up. Everybody was making their way to the living room with their cups of tea, relatively hungover, and that's what was on. I remember Lenny Henry sitting in a bath of milk, I believe, and just thought, what is going on here?
Phantom fan figure.
But it was kind of that thing of it was something for everybody. And I always thought that was really cool and wanted to have stuff that, you know, could both be enjoyed by adults and teenagers and kids too. Yes, way in the back with your arms stretched up. Unless that was your, did I rush you? Did you have a follow-up question? Good, okay.
Fantastic talk, thank you so much. And I just wanted to ask you on behalf of all of us, what you doing? How long are you going to go on doing this fabulous work with Phineas and Ferb, and what are you going to give us next?
Well, we'll keep doing it as long as they'll have us. We've just sort of finished the pre-production portion of season 4, and we've still got about another 8 or 9 months of post-production left. We know we're doing a series of 1-hour specials. Hopefully more if everybody likes the Marvel crossover episode, and we're going to do some more stuff like that. We don't know what we're going to do after that. The one nicest offer that we've had was the guy, Bobby Lopez, who wrote Avenue Q and was one of the writers of Book of Mormon. We found out was a big fan of the show. He came out and wrote some songs with us and then invited us to the premiere of Book of Mormon. And at the after party, he said, so guys, when are we going to write a musical? And we said, anytime you want, but try not to ask us after we just had to watch Book of Mormon, because nothing is more intimidating than following that act. So hopefully one day we'll get to do a musical. We'll see. Right now, we're keeping our head down and making this show as fast as we can.
Thank you.
And thanks for what you're doing. Yes?
Hi, thanks for the presentation.
You got your phone turned on?
Yes.
Good, okay.
I wanted to ask, when you got the show and you were asked to go forward and make it, does it fall to you to put the team together? And how much input did you have on that? Was it just a matter of say, yes, you want the show and you bring everybody, or did Disney sort of give you a team to work with?
They have a great machine with lots, their casting department is brilliant. They brought us tons of voices and stuff like that. The truth is, again, kind of a combination of the two. We knew there were people out there that we wanted to work with, that we brought to Disney. There was people that Disney brought to us. As far as artists, again, that storyboard and writing skill is a very difficult one to find. So they sort of looked to us, because Disney had never done a show that way. We went out there and found all the people that we knew that either we used to work with or were doing that currently or had that skill and brought them in, which was kind of tough because Disney tends to like to work out of their stable of people. And it was another opportunity, for them to have to take a risk. Opportunity, see? Not a struggle or a bump, an opportunity for them to take a risk. And again, they were really pretty good about it, but it was hard because it wasn't the way they normally did things. But we ended up with literally just the most amazing crew. I often say that, and it sounds like hyperbole, but this show would never have gotten done if it wasn't for that crew of people that started storyboarding and writing on this and were willing to learn the way we did it, and also willing to accept the growth, the learning curve that went on with Disney. It was a bit of a struggle at the beginning, so definitely thank them.
Do you feel like you would have been able to put together something so good if it had been picked up the first day that you pitched it, rather than then having 13 years to build that network?
We, Dan and I, got much wiser. And I think having kids made a massive difference in the way I looked at kids' television. And I don't think we'd have made the smarter decisions back then. So the truth is, I'm really grateful that it took 13 years because it allowed me to mature. And seriously, the impact that working and living here had on me has had a massive impact on the show. And I don't think we would have had the international appeal. Because I came back to the States much more aware of the big wide world. And we stopped as often as possible doing things that were really American-centric. And I started to become aware of how often shows did that. And some of our guys kind of did it in a way of like, you know, because you'd say, well, people in France aren't going to get that joke. It's a written joke, or it's, you know, something about a commercial that only shows in the United States. And there was this kind of, oh, well, screw them. That, you know, not that overt, but that was kind of the idea. And it's like, well, you don't have to do that. You can find another joke that'll be a lot more universal. Again, it's a little harder to do, but it's worth the journey. And the payoff has been phenomenal. This show, I think, has reached so many people worldwide. It's because we don't do a lot of stuff that's specifically to the American audience, unless it's just a throwaway gag that nobody's going to notice. Bigger stuff like that we really try to be wary of, and that flavor and some of the characters that we had wouldn't have been in the show had I not spent so much time out of the country living and working and being part of the community. So yeah, I'm glad that it took that long. Although next time, I don't think it needs to take that long. At all. Any other questions?
Last question, please.
Do you have a question?
No,
oh, okay, there you go. Right there. Keep waving.
Hi, Swampy. I've just come from a session in which controller of one of the BBC controllers said something like they're looking for projects where they have strong female leads. So I just wondered whether you've ever considered replicating this kind of formula with like a female lead or you know, a girl duo, really.
I don't know if we'd ever target a show that way. We resisted. Originally, when we got the commission to do the show, the Disney Channel really was servicing the girl market. And one of the reasons they picked up our show is they decided they wanted to pick up the boys market. They didn't want to become a boys channel, but they didn't want to alienate the boys. They wanted to make sure they started to grow a 50-50 channel. So our remit is, can you bring boys to the channel without alienating the girls? And when we tested the show, we literally got a 50-50 audience on that. We couldn't have kind of hit that goal any more clearly or perfectly. And we did that by not specifically trying to target one or the other. We just made the decision, look, we're just going to make this funny. And we have a lot of girls on the crew, writers and storyboard artists, and we just all got together to try to make this funny without trying to overanalyze whether it was boys or girls. And I think I would resist anybody saying there was a boys or a girls show. If you're doing comedy, funny's funny. I'd kind of leave that for other people, but if they picked up my show, I'm just going to try to make it as funny as I can and not try to worry. It would be the same thing that we do for kids. I say, you know, we don't make a show for kids. We just try not to alienate kids. And I would do the same if somebody said it was a girls' show. I just try to make a funny show and be aware of not trying to alienate women or indeed anybody. Except, no, nobody. No. That's the last question, so thank you guys. And I just wanted to say one thing. If you follow all of these steps carefully, in 15 years, you too could have your own successful show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
and
much.
this is a small present from CMC and from Sheffield.
Thank you very much.